All right, guys, part two to the Aimtrak setup here. I do apologize. My daughter was kind of sleepwalking, but she's all good and in bed again, so here we go. Uh, Part two is going to be looking at setting up the MAME controls, and I'll be previewing the light gun wheel, playlist wheel, or collection wheel, if you will. So enjoy. All right, guys, I've got the wheel set up here, and I strongly recommend the playlists. I think that's a launchbox term, but collections wheel, if you will. Think of this as very specific in nature across all systems. So what I have here is a light gun wheel, and what you're going to see is all the artwork that are from my other systems, and the background allows you to see the categories. So we've got the MAME games that are light gun specific, and then we've got names kind of long here with the light guns. Then we've got Nintendo's light gun games. So you could play, your Duck Hunt, which is amazing, at least for me. Nostalgia all over right there. Great theme as well. And then we've got PC games. So the House of the Dead games seem to work best on the PC. So just heads up there. And House of the Dead 3 is by far the hardest one to set up dual light guns. Man, this one took forever. I'll show you guys that specifically on how to get that thing done. Then we've got Adam's Waves, so mostly hunting games, and then we've got Sega CD games that had it, believe it or not, and Sega Dreamcast. Then we had some Sega Genesis games, not many, and then this kind of blows my mind. Sega Master System has a number of light guns, and Sega Model 2, and Sega Model 3, and Naomi. I think that's it. Oh man, we've got more. Sega Saturn, and oh yeah, we've got the PlayStation, and I think there's some PlayStation 2 ones on here as well. So yeah. Oh, and SNES. Man, there's just so many games, guys. It's crazy. And we've got Taito Type X games. And we've got WoW Action Max games. If you had a VHS, Blast from the Past right there. And yeah, so we've got a lot of games here to cover. We're not going to cover each one, but maybe we'll touch these systems to kind of show you how to get these things set up. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to open up a game. So I'm opening up MAME right now. And what we're going to do is hit tab to get to the configurations. And what we're going to do is we're going to update input general and input this machine. So first we're going to go to input general, and we're going to go to player one controls. Once you've done that, you're going to hit up to go to the very bottom. And what we're going to want to do is set up player one's controller. So my blue gun is my player one. And what we're going to do is hit enter on the light gun X analog. And all you're going to do is push a button on that gun and or move the gun left or right or up or down. Left or right. You're going to save the up or down. So once you've pushed left or right, do a hard left or right, and you're going to see the gun number and then X. And if you see that, then you're in good shape. If it says Y, what you're going to have to do is hit enter again and then hit escape to clear that option out. And then you're just going to try it again. You'll hit enter, you'll move to the left, and you're going to hope that gun number X shows up. You'll just kind of rinse and repeat till you get it working. It's kind of hard to explain, even if I show you guys, like, me doing it with my hands. It's, I'll just end up looking like an idiot in general, but you'll eventually, get it to read. So you're going to leave the decline and incline as left and right, so you can still use a keyboard if you don't want to use a light gun. Then you're going to go to light gun Y. So you're going to hit enter, and then you're going to move the light gun controller up or down. Once it shows gun number Y, you're in good shape. And you're going to keep keyboard up and down here. And I think the mouse analog already shows X and Y, but if you wanted to set that up, you could click that and then use your mouse and go left to get the X, and then Y you want to move up. But I'm pretty sure that's default. That is if you want to use another mouse. Remember, these Aimtraks are essentially a mouse. So that's it for player 1. And what we're going to do is go down to return to previous menu, and you're going to go down to player 2 controls. We're going to do the exact same thing here. Something to mention. I forgot to mention it here, guys. If you go down to player 1, buttons 1 through, let's say 5 or 6, what I did is I set up so that gun 4 BO is the trigger for the gun. So that is the sort of set standard for me at least. And then button 2, button 1 is like controller button A on an Xbox controller. Button number 2 is like the X button on an Xbox controller. So what I did is I pushed the left button on my Aimtrak controller in the front, and that got me button 0. Then button 3 here, that is like the B button on the Xbox controller, and what I did is I pushed the right button on my Aimtrak controller. Button 4 is like the Y button on the Xbox controller, and this is again the left button on the Aimtrak controller. And then button 5, this is essentially the left shoulder button on the Xbox controller, and this is basically the right button on the Aimtrak controller. And then button 6, this is the right shoulder button on the Xbox controller, and this is the right button on the Aimtrak controller. So how I was able to do a keyboard press or the light gun button here, basically you just push enter, you push the keyboard stroke, let's say Z for instance, and then hit enter, and then you'll hit enter again very quickly afterwards, and then you'll be able to map another button, and you'll just push the Aimtrak button and you'll see the 2 show up there. If you screw up, just hit enter and then hit escape and then try it again, and everything will be just peachy. So I'm going to go to player 2 now. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to set up the buttons 1 through 6, and you can see there's a different number here, gun 2, and the Joy 1. Again, we're just setting up the buttons, as you see fit. Those extra buttons are basically used for some of the games that require you to push a button to go left or right on different paths. So just food for thought there. So we're going to go back to the light gun player 2 setup, essentially. So you're going to get the red light gun, and you're going to push enter, and then move your gun left or right hardly, and hard left or right, and you're going to get that thing to say gun 2X. You're going to put the decline and incline, that's going to be default actually, and then you're going to go to light gun Y. So you're going to click that, and then you're going to move your light gun up or down quickly, and it will read gun 2Y. Same thing with the mouse. I think that's by default. So that's it on the configuration, guys, in MAME. And we'll go ahead and check the input to this machine next. So next we've got to basically set up the controls for the light gun itself for this specific system. And what you're going to do is just go down here where it says light gun again. And unfortunately, you know, this was one of the games that was showing up on that Aimtrak guide where you had to give it some extra love and support here. So you're going to go through and do the exact same thing that you guys just did and just go light gun analog. You're going to go hard left or hard right to get that thing to read gun number X. And same thing for Y. You're going to move up or down on your Aimtrak controller for player 1. You'll do the same thing for player 2. And yeah, also make sure that you set up your volume up and volume down for this game. Because when you go to service mode, which is a button that you've set up, or its default, I think it's F2 is the service button. So once you go to the service button on this game, it will basically say use volume up and down to basically make your selection. And yeah, you'll calibrate your gun. And yeah, it's as you can see, it's a lot of tedious stuff here, guys, but it works out great in the end. So I'm going to go to the end here. And yeah, that's it on the inputs. If I push F2 here, sorry guys, my daughter just came in and she's a little sleepy. So I'm gonna pause this video and I'll be right back. Okay guys, so to finish where I left off here, I'm gonna just open up MAME here. I'm in Rocketlauncher MAME, and I'm gonna click this under modules launch emulator. So I'm gonna get the game that we were just looking at, Area 51, and we've got a number of renditions here. It looks like I think it's the MX1 here. I'm just gonna go ahead and open that and let's see what we got here. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm actually looking at the wrong version here, so this is going well, guys. Maximum Force Duo, it might be this one. And that's the other thing with MAME, the XML, basically the Hyperspin XML filters out all the junk games. So that's what you were just seeing on the other one. So this is the real one that we're trying to set up here. So we set up the input and we looked at the machine input. All that's left to do is if you go to F2, that will get you to the service options. And remember when I was saying that you should look at the volume up and down keys from the machine configuration setup. This is why. So you can see that to test, use the gun, and basically we're going to be calibrating the gun, or at least testing it if your cursor is not lining up. So this isn't one of the games that require you to do any sort of monkey business in the configuration of the service option, but there are games that will require it. So just kind of keep note of that Aimtrak configuration guide on, I think it was page 19 or 20 of that PDF that was in the descriptions below of the first video. So yeah, push F2 whenever your Aimtrak controller is not working correctly, and chances are you just have to activate the gun under the options of F2. So I'm not really going to go into this because it's, again, just kind of dry humor here. But ultimately, if this was one of the games that would require that activation, you would just go down using the service keys that were set up that most likely are the volume up and down buttons. You can see I can't really select anything if I use the arrows. So I'm going to go ahead and back up out of that. I'm just going to hit escape because we've essentially set up Area 51 here. Now you're going to say, Justin, you know, I've got to do this for every system, and the answer is yes for the system, but not for the game. So once you've set up MAME, you know, the main configuration, you've only got to do that once in the general. The game list that is in the Aimtrak PDF, some of those games will require you to go to input this machine, and when you enter that, you'll just put in the extra configurations and set up the volume up and down so you can play with the service button, which is default to F2. But really, we're talking, you know, minor things. You know, as you get rolling here, you're going to find it's pretty easy to get through each one of these games. Yeah, so that is the MAME setup. So what I'm going to do is get out of here, and we're going to look at, let's say, Topia next. So what we're going to do is just go to Topia, and I'm going under modules here, and what I'm going to do is just pull up Topia's emulator, and let's see here. Topia, let's try this again. It might be right click. Okay, so sorry, it's been a while since I've had to do this, guys. So I had to right click in here to get the menu to display here. So I'm just going to go to options, and we're going to go to input. And what we're going to do is go down to, we're looking for a light gun option here. Let's see. Yep, so here you go, joysticks here. We've got Aimtrak 2 and Aimtrak 1. You're basically just going to select your device, and you're going to have the check boxes here set up here. So yeah, that's it for Topia here, guys. Pretty easy to set up. You're going to find this workflow is very similar on all of the systems. So I'm not going to go into every single one of these, but yeah, that's it. So having that set up, we'll cover all of the other wheels that you were seeing for Topia. Also for, what was another one? Fusion. So Fusion covers a number of these systems, and when you open that, we're gonna set config. This, I believe this is another one of those INI files that you want to make sure is set to read only, so it doesn't override your stuff. So just a heads up there. And when you go to controllers, let's see, might have been extras. Let's look. Yep, so here you go. Light gun cursor is checked, and we've got controller pad here, controller pad there. We've got keyboards. So it doesn't look like there was a whole lot to set up here other than just the light gun cursor. And let's just double check. Yep, that looks good. And just so I'm not crazy here, I'm just double checking. Yep, that's it there. Also, we've got Adam's Wave. That was another one. So this is one of those systems that require Mule. I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but basically it's an emulator, and there's an add-on that is Mule Shooter. So when I go on to this system and I click modules, and I go ahead and click edit global modules, I believe I'm using version 0.7 here. You're going to see a pop-up here, and you see a mess of things here, guys. but it's not as bad as what it seems here at first with the tabs here. So what we're going to do is go to the settings here, and what I ended up doing is I went to each one of the games that had light gun support, and you can see down at the bottom here there is a Demule shooter enabled, and what you're going to want to do is set that to true. Let's see if I can find one here. Yep, so there you go. So looking at Ranger Mission, so you can see that the only change that I've made to that game is Demule shooter enabled. So you'll just go through each one of your games that need light gun support, and you'll just mark that Demule shooter enabled to true. There's only going to be 3 or 4 of them within Adamswave. You can slow down the video at the beginning of this video to kind of look at what's in that wheel and what games are supported. So let's see. Actually, I'm going to pull up the video that I just made here, guys, and we're gonna just cheat a little bit and look at what other systems we need to be looking at here. So let's close that one. Here, sorry guys, sorry. Nothing to see. It's yeah, that's my file here. Lo and behold, we will find this. Here we go. So, yeah, we just talked about MAME. Talked about that. Okay, PC we got to look at. Adamswave, that's Fusion. Dreamcast. Okay, so PlayStation. Okay. So next we're going to look at Action Max here, and let's see, we're using Daphne here. I believe this just comes working by default. I don't think there's anything, yeah, there's nothing that I ended up actually setting up there. Let's see. Sega Naomi, it's the same sort of story. We're looking at Demule, Demule, and we're basically just looking at the module and then the edit global settings. So the exact same thing as what you guys were just looking at with Adams Wave. It's the exact same thing. So go into ROM setting, looking at each one of the games, and then just changing the Demule shooter enabled. Also Dreamcast, I think that's the same thing. So we're gonna just double check. So we're looking at null. Okay, so Dreamcast is a little different. It depends on what emulator you're using, but null DC is my default. But then I also have Demule basically set up as well, and I use this as an alternate emulator, if you will. So I've got the module pointed to Demule 0.7, and then I've got the extensions that supports. All you've got to do is hit the plus sign, and you essentially put in that information, the emulator, extension, and module. So I'm going to just double click that so you see it, and I'm going to close it, and that would show up there. But if I go to the games here, what we're going to be looking at is the Emulator Alternate emulator here. So these are the games that, well, some of these are light games. Other games are more compatible with Demule here. So basically all I would do is hit the plus sign, I'd put in the game name, and yeah, that'd be it. So I'd select the game, I would select the system, and I'd select the emulator that I wanted. So I would select Demule, I would select the system of what I want the fade to look like. So I would select a Dreamcast here, and I would type in the name of the game, and I would hit save. And then it would show up here, and that's all you got to do there. So it's very particular, guys, and you know you might not even need all this. You know, if you've got a playlist, then of course this is the ideal approach. It will take a little bit of time, but you still will have to update the emulators to support the light guns themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and try opening up Demule here. Let's see here. We're going to go here. Yeah. So here's Demule. We're going to go to controls. And here is my setup here. So kind of scanning through here. I don't think there's anything there that I need here. Let's see. Plugins and paths. Yeah, here guys, I'm flying blind. It's been a while here, so I'm skimming here. That all looks good. And Maple device. Here we go. So if you go to configure Maple device and you're going to go to port B, you're going to select light gun from the drop down, and you're going to have everything that looks like here. You're going to just select the drop down VMU, whatever that is, but I think that comes by default. But that's all you've got to do to set up Demule here. And when it comes to Demule shooter, I don't think this is actually something you configure on every system. So when you pull up Demule shooter, I'll provide some links to this app in general. What you're going to do is just go to player 1 configure, and you're going to select the device. So it's a hot mess here, but I know that my light guns are the 209, so that D209 here. See D209. These are both the light guns. The others are USBs. You can kind of tell, well, it should be D209. That should be an indicator that those are your light guns. But you'll also see 1601 and 1602. You might have a different number, but the numbers are going to be very close to one another. So just kind of take a leap of faith and do your testing, but it should be something like D and then a number. So yeah, you're going to just have this checkbox here. These keys don't really matter too much here. The keyboard key, I think these are actually defaulted to where they are now, but you're going to do that for each one of these. Just click the checkbox and then push the keyboard key, which you don't even need. You just need to set something to it. Calibration, I did not do anything here, but there are the options that I've got set. Same with this tab here. I did not do anything here. I did not touch either of these tabs, but this is what I see here. Same with this, and then this. So there's nothing that really you got to do other than just select the device, and that should get things rolling for you on a number of the systems that used Demule shooter. And remember, we're just checking the drop down when we go to Demule and we select global module settings. We're selecting each one of these light gun games that require you know, a light gun to play it. Let's see, what else? Let's see, I don't want to miss any of these wheels for you. Talked about that. Okay, so we got PlayStation and SNES. Let's see, yep. Okay. Man, do you guys ever just listen to your voice and think, man, do I really sound like that? All right, so Sony PlayStation. So what we're going to do, we're going to open up, I think it's the EP, yep. We're going to open up this emulator here. We're going to go to configuration. We're going to go to gamepad, pad 1. And this one was a fun one to set up, guys. So here's my setup here. We're going to use GunCon, port 1 and 2. We're going to use raw input, and we're going to snap mouse to the window. When you hit configure, For port 1, this is what I've got set up here. So kind of mirror that, and yep. So you're going to hit acquire, you're going to hit OK. You're going to do that same thing for port 2. You're going to mirror this, and then you're going to hit acquire, and you're going to hit OK. And you've got that thing set up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. We've got PCSX2, and we're going to do the same thing. Sorry guys, let me just double check. Yep, so we're good there. Let me just double check the other one. Whoops. What I'm doing is I'm just double checking Rocketlauncher. I'm pretty sure these don't require any additional plugins. Looking. Nope. Nope. All right, yeah. So you guys are golden on PSX. Let's take that back. So PSX, the PlayStation. There was one game, Time Crisis here. What I had to do was I had to change the gamepad type, player 1 and player 2. I just had to select the G-Con 45 because that's what that emulator supports. So there you go. That's under the ROM settings. How I got there was I just went to the emulator EPSX and I hit the module settings, and I just went to the ROM settings, hit plus sign to select the Time Crisis, and then I scrolled down and selected the game type player 1 and 2. So now we're going to move to PCSX2, and we're going to just double check the module settings again. Let's see. Yep, we're good there, and there are no games that require any sort of hacking, so that is good. Yep, that is good. So all we got to do is go into the emulator itself. So I'm going to select that, hit the launch emulator, and I'm going to select PCSX2. This was another toughie, guys. I just want to make sure I'm still recording. Yeah. All right. Sorry, guys, it's getting late. So if I go to configuration and I go to, let's see, emulator settings, multi-tab controllers. Okay, so controllers, and then plugin settings. All right, so this is the setup that I have. This was probably one of the more difficult ones to set up, guys. So general, use direct input, check X input, and this should appear, the X input here. Local volume is checked. Disabled mouse API there. So that is that. I'm going to go to pad 1 tab, and you just set up your controls like you would normally. Outside of that, I've also got the X input pad 0 set here. And then moving on to pad 2, going to set up your controls just like you normally would, and you've got X input pad 0 here on player 2. Now, there's something to mention. Some of these games, maybe I wasn't aware of, they appear to be light gun games, but they're actually games that require you to use a controller, which is just weird, but that's how some of the games were originally intended, so just kind of keep that in mind. It might not be your setup, it actually might be the game. So that was part of my issue when I was setting this up. I was testing on a game that did not allow light guns, even though it clearly looked like it and should have. It just would have been more fun if it did. But anyway, so you're good there on the PCSX2. And let's double check to see what else we got. It might be just PC that we've got to cover here. Yep. That's Fusion. It's Fusion. Talked about Naomi. Okay, so Sega Model 2 and 3 will do, and SNES. Okay. SNES here. This was a quick one here. SNES. Where are you? There you go. All right, so this one is, yeah, the SNES. Here we go. So I'm pulling up the module, or the emulator here. Boy, so this was one of the emulators that get funky on the setup here, and I almost don't want to mess with it because the bezel itself, basically, you've got to fit that screen just right to lock it in place. But you're just going to go to controls. I'm gonna do you guys justice here. So SNES, what we're gonna do is just look at the light gun games, and I'm just scrolling down here to see if, yep, Super Scope. So you can see there's not a whole lot of things to really set up here. You can just see that I selected Super Scope for 4, so that's what the light gun was called, and that's the number that you're going to want to select whenever you've got a light gun game. So you can see all these games are set to 4. So yeah, that is that, and that's all you got to do. So I'm going to just double check the emulator folder here, and we're going to just look at the INIs to kind of show you what needs to be selected, because I don't want to mess with the GUI there. But it's going to be obvious to you guys when you're setting it up, when you're actually in the emulator for the first time. So if we go to input config, this should get the job done here. I'm going to open in Notepad. That's a hot mess. So we've got controllers, ports. Let's see, multi-tap. So we've got mouse. That's going to be important. You're basically just going to want to make sure that your X and Y axis is set up, and your left and right button is mapped to button 0, which is the left button on your Aimtrak, and button 2 is your right button on your Aimtrak controller. Let's see. Those are just the keys that I've got set up. Yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, port 2, gonna do the same thing. You're gonna set your X and Y axis for your mouse and your left and right. And that should be it, guys. Yep, so Super Scope here. So the turbo and the pause doesn't really matter. The important part is you've got X and Y set up, and then you've got the trigger and cursor set up under the controller configurations in the GUI. You're going to see that this basically just repeats. I'll do a later tutorial on this emulator, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Just like what we've been doing so far, you just open up the emulator, you find the controls path, and then you edit the controls. So let's see, we've got, oh yeah, the PC. This one was the hardest one. Oh yeah, sorry, and the Sega Model 2 and 3. So Sega Model, we're going to pull that up. We're going to go to Rocketlauncher first, and we're just double checking, and we are looking for a light gun game, Lost World. There we go. And there's the setup, guys. There's nothing tricky about this one. Yeah, so we're going to open up the module. Oh, yeah. So I think this one also worked out of box. Check out a later tutorial for this emulator itself. But you know, once you get that emulator set up in general, things are working good. I don't think there was anything special there. Let's go to Sega Model 2, and we're going to double check the emulator options. We are looking good there. We're looking good. So we're going to look at the emulator itself, and we're going to go to Game, Configure Controls. And maybe I didn't click it here. yeah, that's weird, guys. So it's not liking it. Maybe it's because I'm recording. I can't explain that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the emulators folder. We're going to go to Sega Model 2, Sega Model 3, Sega Model 2. And we're going to just go to, let's look at the INI. And I'm going to skim through here to see if there's anything that we need to call out here. Okay, so there's the input. We need to have X input equals 0. Use raw input equals 0, raw dev 0 and 1, and let's see what else might be helpful. Yep, so same story goes, guys. You're just going to open up the emulator, you're going to go to controls, you're going to make sure that everything looks golden. There's just not a whole lot of setup here. It's usually just a click or two in each one of these emulators. But now we've gotten to the moment that we've all been waiting for, PC games here. This one is a unique breed, just like some of the other ones, like Dreamcast. We've got alternate emulators going on here. I just kind of want to show some of that off. So if we go to House of the Dead, there were 3 games that were PC games here. Scroll down here. And we're going to go to House of the Dead. Alright, so House of the Dead, we've got a path to the exe file, and what we've also got to do is, that one looks clean, so that's all you're doing is mapping to the exe. With House of the Dead 2, we've got mapping to the exe, and the pre and post launch, this was fun. So the post launch needs to be set to troubleshooter exe, even though the startup script, was, always auto launching for these games. Don't ask me why, but this is the only way that House of the Dead 2 would work. So troubleshooter post launch, and then the post exit is set to the game script close troubleshooter exe, which I'll be providing to you guys. But basically, I think it was just an auto hotkey to close the troubleshooter because the startup script wasn't closing troubleshooter. So remember, if there's multiple instances, it kind of freezes things up. This was just a foolproof method to prevent that from happening. But if you don't have the game, then it doesn't even matter. So next we've got House of the Dead 3. This was the hardest one to set up in general. Basically, you assign the exe, which this is basically a bat file, or sorry, an auto hotkey file that I turned into an exe. It was basically a command line to run the House of the Dead 3, and I don't know, I think it's the splash screen that was causing it some weirdness. But then the pre-launch path is going to be your path, like the actual path to the House of the Dead 3 game. And then your post-launch is to close this Mule shooter House of the Dead 3. So huge pain, guys, but I'm gonna say it's awesome if you could get it to work. It works great with one gun, but the paths that I just showed you, oh, and also the pre-launch mode had to be set to run. I mean, this thing was such a pain in the butt to get both guns working. It works by default with one. Don't ask me why, but we made it through here. So let me just pull up the games here, and we're going to look at PC here, and we're going to just pull that folder up just to kind of show you what we got going on here. Might be the, yeah, we're going the, here we go. All right, so here's the House of the Dead 3 here. Basically, there's this auto start exe file, and then there's these other XEs that I ended up creating, and then I've got a whole mess of things here. I had to put Demule Shooter, and it's in the actual XE folder. To be honest, guys, this House of the Dead 3 setup could be a tutorial in itself. So I don't want to waste your guys' time. You guys have already, been troopers and watched this video. This is probably close to an hour tutorial to set up Aimtrak guns here. So I apologize, and I thank you for, keeping up with me here. So, so that's House of the Dead 3. Comment if you guys are trying to set that up. It might be just better to help you guys personally, because this was a hot mess. But it is working. I can share the files with you guys, when you guys, or if you guys approach this this game. It is fun. So anyhow, last but not least, Rocketlauncher. We were talking about the PC launcher modules for that House of the Dead 3. So I'm just going to go burn through that real quick. PC launcher here, and we're going to game scripts, and you can see I just kept trying to create these exe files, and I've got the pre-launch auto hotkey. Like, it was just trial and error. I just kept going until it ended up working. So, yeah, guys. So if you guys need help, just comment below, and I'll reach out to you guys. So that should be it on the Aimtrak controllers. That's it, right, guys? So we've talked about all the systems that support light guns, and we've looked at all the controls. So you can see it after you get through MAME. It's much easier. It's just usually a click or two because we're accepting the mouse. And yeah, that's it, guys. So enjoy, and let me know if you guys run into any snags, and good luck.